Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Revenue Cycle Leaders Coffee Chat. Today, we were going to talk a little bit more about the implementation side of things. So pain points, pitfalls, but then also, and Pam likes to say this, it doesn't really need to be that scary. And so we're going to break down the different elements of onboarding and implementation. We're going to tie it back to sales. We're going to give some examples of these pain points and pitfalls that we've seen in our onboarding and implementation. Hopefully this resonates with some folks. But then we're also going to talk about the lessons learned from those pitfalls and what we're doing differently to try and avoid them in the future. So let's get started. One of the things that we've noticed in the handoff from sales to onboarding implementation success is that oftentimes the teams that sit with and ultimately sign the contracts are revenue cycle leaders, they are CFOs, they are the folks who hold the purse strings and manage the budgets. And the people who join us for the project of onboarding and implementation of Milagro, and in general, right, those who implement software within large organizations, health centers, and ASCs are often not those same people who signed the contract. And so one of the things that we find we need to do pretty regularly is reintroduce the project team to Milagro, to the software, to the team that they're going to be working with, to the concepts behind why Milagro was even purchased, what is the value add, how is it going to impact their daily activities, and what is the onboarding and implementation process going to look like for them, right? All of these people have day jobs, and this project is overlaid on top of that. And the ultimate goal is for them to have an easier time for coding, for identifying mismatch denials, for providing better care ultimately to their patients because the revenue cycle is more streamlined. But all of this comes with a period of onboarding and implementation. So that's what we wanted to break down, and we'll take it step by step. The first thing we need to do is assemble the right project team within the customer and healthcare environment or health system, right? So who needs to be at the table throughout the entire project life cycle, if you will, right? It is gonna need to be probably a project sponsor. And so that is usually the person who is within leadership, who was part of the sales cycle, knows Pam, knows the sales team, has already been introduced to Milagro, knows what we do, knows the value and the ROI. And they usually are the ones who are present for the entire onboarding and implementation project. The other team members that we need are, depending on the phase of the implementation project that we're on, we need the subject matter experts, the SMEs. I'm not going to use a lot of acronyms, but SME, subject matter expert, is one of those acronyms I will use. So we need those specialists throughout the project, depending on the phase that we're at. And then, of course, we need the data that is going to flow ultimately into our system and be coded. And that's the sort of meat of it, if you will. So we need the project team and those folks who will be ongoing throughout the effort. We need subject matter experts who come in and out depending on where we are within the project, and we need the data. So maybe let's break that down even further. And maybe Pam, let's tie it back first to sales.
Yeah, I definitely, there were a couple of things you were saying, and I was like, wait a second, I want to make a couple points here because you're spot on, right? I mean, we look at it two ways. I want to look at it two ways. The customer or the health system that we're selling into, let's think about that, their teams and you bring up some valid points, right? We're selling something, or they purchased something, and maybe the team that's going to use it doesn't even know about it. So that's kind of where there's a little bit of a disconnect, and it's our job to bring that all together into the forefront for the entire team that will be using the product. So I'm the initial person, right, that they meet. I'm the salesperson. I'm on the front end of all of this. And like you said, I might be meeting with the senior leadership or executives, C-suite, CFO, RevCycle, directors, and the team that's going to utilize this solution doesn't even really know about it. So then they get the news, right? Hey, we found this great solution. It's going to help you. Well, first of all, there's probably some pushback because they didn't have a dog in the fight, right? They didn't even they sometimes not even part of the decision-making process. Now they're going to be forced to use something. So there's a few things that we do here. My role is to be as clear and concise as possible with who I'm selling to so that they can kind of pass that knowledge on. Sharing decks and simple things like white papers and very basic breakdowns of if something's going to share that, is it going to make sense to the person reading that? So that's kind of how we begin that process. Let's make sure that they have the material. If it's going to get passed off, at least they have a kind of an inkling of what's coming. And then for me, it's an education piece too. I'm passing it off to my team in implementation. But they kind of have to know where we are with this, right? Like, who are we walking into? And that goes to your point of assembling the right team. Who are we now going to be speaking to? It's important for the health system on one side to be brought together and all be educated, but it's important for us internally, right? To be on the same page, you and I, our teams. I can't just have somebody sign a contract and then I go away to the next, customer or prospect. For me, it's part of my job is to make sure we're all going to be successful. Part of my job is to meet internally with my team. So we work on that too. On our side, our company works on that, right? We have meetings, Anna, I think we had one yesterday, improving our processes, making sure that handoffs are smooth, making sure, it's knowledge transfer. What I know, then you can line up those subject matter experts on our side, line up the right people on their side. So you have knowledge of what, has already been transferred and what needs to be, because then we go to the next step. And now they're going to, like, to your point, they're going to need a little bit of an education piece, right? Mostly. I mean, I've done demos for after sales. We've done demos. The product is sold. You think you're done. Well, I mean, there's a team of people that don't know what this is. So let's now spend some time, build a good foundation. So I just kind of like to highlight both of those. It's twofold. It's on our side internally, and it's on what we do with our customer.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we get the right team assembled on our side. We get the right team assembled on their side. And your point is a good one. We just the other day scheduled a demo of Milagro software, quoting automation, for a customer where we are definitely halfway through implementation already. But there was a new person brought into the project team. They are more part of the professional billing side of things as opposed to the hospital billing side of things. And they wanted just more information. And so we did a demo for them. But like you said, we're already through the sort of sales side of things. And yet it's an important component of what we do. Okay, so we've assembled a team. We have gone through the documentation that we need. Obviously, throughout the sales cycle, there are all the different governance boards. So I think even one of our first coffee chats was about the AI governance boards that we are now seeing be introduced. But I'm bringing this up just to highlight there are many different phases, even within the sales cycle, that introduce Milagro to different teams within the customer environment that then need to come back up during sales and implementation. And that's a nice segue into looping in the right SMEs from both, Pam, to your point, our team, but also from the customer team. So for example, one of the things that we need to do is connect into the customer's electronic health record system, right? Be it Epic or SIS or one of the others. Nowadays, folks are also using these AI transcript generating sort of ambient noise collectors, right, in their surgery rooms which means that sometimes the op notes are auto-generated, if you will, by these ambient listeners. So that's another thing that we're starting to integrate and think about in terms of how do we put that technology to use. Sometimes it connects into Epic, other times it connects into SYS or into other databases, but we need those subject matter experts from the technical teams, from the health information management teams, from the network and interface teams at the customer facilities. And all of these subject matter experts are not part of the ongoing project team, right? These are not folks who do coding. These are not folks whose day jobs are going to change when Milagro brings in coding automation or when Milagro helps facilitate identifying mismatches in CPT codes and therefore preventing denials. These are folks that only get involved at the very beginning of onboarding and implementation to implement VPN connections, to implement interfaces for HL7 data, to flow both into Milagro for coding purposes and back from Milagro to the customer for coding completed cases. Those SMEs are very important to bring into the loop at the right time of the implementation. For these teams also, sometimes we need to do a demo, reiterate the value that Milagro brings to the table, re-explain what the ROI is, how fast we're going to get to it, why, we need, PHI document sharing arrangements with them, right? And working through all of that, I would say, is a pitfall that I think probably everyone working in sales, onboarding, and implementation in the software space has experienced, but also something that we're aware of, and therefore we can work through.
I also think, Anna, this is a good time to talk about, because it's right in that space where we're working with during implementation and handovers, and there's managing expectations. And I think this is something that happens internally again with us. Say, did you tell them we were going to do this? And so we're all having these conversations internally. Everything's documented, but people interpret things differently. What was said and what was really heard, or what was heard and what was really said, I should say. So on both ends, right? So we do, obviously we have lengthy contracting that goes on, but then the interpretation is still up to the health system and us. So there's this piece where we're really trying to say, let's put the expectations out there. Let's manage what expectations they have. Let's make sure that we're clear. This is, we can go contract line item by line item by line item on the contract, but we're dealing with people, their jobs. You have to be a little bit flexible to their workflows, how to make things right and work well for them. And I think we do a good job of being flexible with that. But there is this part right in this time space, and this very important handover to implementation, gathering the right teams, where we're managing all the expectations of what we've just sold and what they've just purchased, right?
Yep. I think that's a really good point. And I think one of the things that we need to do, not only with the project team and the SMEs, but also in general, when we also get to the phase of data collection, is we need to make sure that the expectations are set around how is your day going to change? How's your work going to change? I think some people, and I think we brought this up in a previous conversation, coffee chat as well, Pam, right? We've heard within the market and industry that getting new coders, sort of, new generations of coders is getting harder and harder. And the workforce of coders is starting to age out and retire. And I think there's probably this sort of push-pull within the industry of, hey, wait a second, if we're bringing in coding automation, what does that mean for my job? And so I think there is this element of making sure that in addition to everything that has to go into the onboarding and implementation, and expectation setting in terms of the work. It's also, what is your day job going to look like once we're implemented?
Sure.
What's the impact going to be to the network team, to the Epic team, to the coding team, we have one customer that the team within their health system that deals with denials and mismatches is called the IV team, the insurance verification team. So it's a completely different team than the scheduling team. And if we, Milagro, prevent mismatches and the need for reauthorization because we catch the denial that much sooner, what happens with that team? Right? These are highly experienced people with a very unique skill set. They know how to talk to payers. We all need to pause on that one, right? Like, no one wants to talk to payers, and they do a very good job of that. But what happens to their job? And how do we, Milagro as the vendor, and Pam, you set this up nicely, right? How do you on the sales side set this up nicely with the revenue cycle leadership to explain that we're not replacing, we are augmenting, we are strengthening, we are supporting, we are building these teams so that they can really focus on the things that matter and make the health system revenue cycle work more smoothly.
Right. Correct. And I think also it's easy, if you just step away from the big picture and think about the people that this affects, right? We're all here. We all have a job to do. We work in healthcare because we want better outcomes and we want better healthcare. We want patients to, we want health systems to be more profitable, work more efficiently, people's jobs be better and easier. But at the end of the day, we're going to talk to a group of people who are going to just sit there and say, how does this affect me? Like personally, how does this affect me? You know, great. It's got operational efficiencies. You're going to make $4 million more a year than you did last year. You're going to do all of these things, but that doesn't matter to the coder sitting in that seat or that verification specialist sitting in that seat. How is this going to affect me? If we remember that while we're selling it, while we're implementing it, while we're training, we're going to be doing a much better job, and we're going to have probably better buy-in, better participation, and everyone will have better results.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next sort of element, if you will, and that is the success criteria and metrics and the KPIs that ultimately we are working towards within the implementation project, right? Like, what is the end result of implementation? Milagro is coding 80 to 85% of any given subspecialty that the hospital has. Accuracy rates are 95% and above. Sometimes they fluctuate between 98 and 96%. Those are always fun conversations to have. Like, why did you drop 2% from 98 to 96? And you're like, let's look at the data. Let's break that open. But ultimately, right, once you lay out these success criteria and the KPIs, that's where the implementation efforts sort of hit their peak, if you will. And that's really where the implementation team, the customer success team, can build on the relationship that was built throughout the implementation and onboarding project, so that we've built the confidence in us, the people, right, who are doing this on board. We've built the confidence and the trust in the system because we're using human in the loop AI. We're building very complex logic, right, that requires like a lot of detailed, intricate understanding of surgical procedures. Even outpatient procedures can be highly technical, right? And ultimately, we're working towards getting to that point of trust in us and in the system that they can pull away, right? They don't need to audit 100% of cases. They can move on to the more complicated things. They can trust that if something does come up, we just had this conversation yesterday, Pam, with our sister company Commence, right? Like, what happens when we identify a trend while we're coding that seems like there's an anomaly running through the coding, right? So we just saw one with one of our customers where actually one of their coders who was auditing the completed cases was changing something for one of the payers for Aetna to a different code than what Milagro had coded. I'm getting a little bit in the weeds, but the story is relevant. We looked at the audit logs of what Milagro had coded and what was then changed by the human coder. And what we noticed was that actually the human coder wasn't fully updated on this specific payer was Aetna, on Aetna's rules for implants, and specifically for like this knee implant, I believe, right? And so the human coder was changing things based on what they thought was right. Our system had already been updated with these new guidelines, right? And had we not, and I promise I'm tying it all together, had we not built the trust in us as a team, in the system, and the logic that we've built into the system, the conversation would have been very different when the audit came back and we had to go back to the customer and say, hey, your coder and auditor was wrong. Our system was right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And
that goes back to Pam, what you said, which is right. Like we will be more successful at the end of the day when we set expectations and we communicate thoughtfully, like what it is we're doing here and how we are helping at the end of the day to support and build a stronger system. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Well, that's all right. I was just going to say the data is so important, right? We have to say align the data, but the data that we use, the data that's available, the transparency of the system, being able to go in with coders, their coders, our coders, and be able to look at that data. So, I mean, the proof is all right there too. So that's, we talk about aligning the data and the workflows, getting the right team. I think you kind of put it all together, Anna, to get the right team, bring in those SMEs at the right time on our side and their side, align the data. And then we can start measuring results for our customers.
Yeah. And I think, the more confidence you build, the more the customer, and then this is where, Pam, you come back into the cycle, right? Because the more confidence we build as a post-sale team in onboarding and implementation, in ongoing KPI and success metrics, the more the revenue cycle leadership wants to continue to expand, right? So one of our customers is a bunch of ambulatory surgery centers in New England. And we went from doing GI cases in one facility to adding the eyes specialty, which they run in 4 different facilities. So now we've got 5 facilities. And then we expanded into orthopedics with multiple subspecialties, and we're up to 12 facilities, right? So the same has happened with other of the hospital centers where we start with the hospital center, like the hub, if you will, itself, and their outpatient surgeries. But then once we build that confidence in us, in the software, in the coding automation, in the denial and mismatch identification, we've now expanded into 3 of their outpatient surgery centers that are tied back to the hospital. But that confidence allows the revenue cycle teams also to look at expanding further and getting that value and benefit from Milagro.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just, to kind of wrap it up really is to talk about, we need to make sure that we're not assuming that from when I send something to you, when a customer has decided to buy something, that they know, first of all, what it is. We can't make any assumptions. We need to meet individually with all of our teams. We need to really understand where they are in the process, what they know, what they don't know, educate as necessary. If it's an additional demo, I mean, come on, they haven't seen it yet. They're going to be using it. Like we have to just, spend some time, listen, understand, don't assume anything, and then be able to, work together as a team on our side, sales and customer service and customer success and implementation on their side with all of the teams within the health system. And we know that they're siloed in some sense too. So we just, we all work together and communicate really well and make sure that we are again, setting those expectations, hitting those KPIs, making a solid implementation for somebody that can get a good product and use it wisely and know what they have. Some people use software like they don't even know what they're using and they don't ever use it to their ability. So we want to avoid all of that, right? We just want to make sure that we kind of like, we do a really good job in transferring knowledge on our end, and on, when we build the teams and implement, that we're doing a solid job.
Yeah. I think let's leave it at that. We do
Yeah.
a solid job.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.